Well, some people would still say that the number one misconception about energy work, energy psychology, EFT tapping in particular, is there any science? Is there any research? And the objection is really coming from a lack of up-to-date knowledge. And the question or the concern is EFT a evidence-based practice? Is there science? Is there research behind it? And I got to tell you, back in the day, early 90s, when EFT was first given to the world by its founder, Gary Craig, I shared those objections. I mean, my academic training was in science and was very research based. And I worked, my first job was at the National Research Council here in Canada as an organic chemist. And so that question was deeply important to me because there wasn't in the early days. How could there be any research? That question is simply not a question anymore. So let me cover it really quickly in case that is a concern or a question that is in your mind. And then we can move on to something which I think is actually much more interesting than that. So I have a couple of slides here. Let me share them with you. There we go. So there is so much research at the moment, but what I tried to do is just very, very quickly to summarize it. Energy psychology is an umbrella term for a lot of different approaches to working directly with energy. Emotional freedom techniques tapping is the most used and the most researched form of energy psychology. So taken all together, the body of research shows that energy psychology is an effective treatment for pain, anxiety, depression, food cravings, trauma, PTSD, peak athletic performance, changes in biological markers of stress. So this really covers the gamut, doesn't it? It covers physical pain, physical distress, chronic disease processes in the body, emotional distress, anxiety, depression, relationship with food, the way the body has adapted to events that were overwhelming to it at the time, the whole trauma, PTSD, but also in peak performance, athletic, but also music and all kinds of different performances that human beings are engaged in, and biological markers of stress. I'll show you another slide that teases that out. Now, specifically, we're talking about the gold standard as it exists in traditional approaches to therapy and coaching, which is cognitive behavioral. And so it just pulled out this 8 studies that show that energy psychology, EFT, is either equivalent to or more effective than CBT. And in fact, research that the results are achieved in significantly less time and actually hold for longer periods of time after the intervention as well. So just really as a summary, there's over 600 identified forms of psychotherapy, many of which have little or no research to validate them. So energy psychology is both energy-based and in the top 10% in terms of published research for psychotherapy modalities. I spoke a little bit about the biological markers. So we know from research, I just pulled one out here, that all of the markers of stress, cortisol, for example, goes down with tapping, immune system up, pain down, anxiety, depression. I'll let you have a look at that. But what I want to say here is that, well, then why are we seeing such an effect across so many different issues with emotional freedom techniques? And that's because we have learned the mechanism, more about the mechanism of how EFT is working in the body. So as we're tapping on these acupressure points, we're actually sending electrical signals through the subtle energy system, which we believe now we're seeing some evidence that that's actually working through the connective tissue, the fascia of the body, and then ultimately is getting to the emotional centers of the brain, which are responsible for the threat response, fight, flight, freeze, and so on, and sending messages of safety to the emotional centers of the brain. So the the stress system is interrupted, is downregulated, and the biological system then moves into its rest and digest and growth mode. So, of course, if we have such a readily available, easily applied approach to interrupting that stress response, since we know stress is the major component in all of those issues that I just talked about, of course, we would expect then to see some impact across all of those issues. So now, I think more interesting is this beautiful, I see it as a love story. Right, and it's a love story. I'm thinking about that beautiful line from Beauty and the Beast, right? A tale as old as time, right? True as it can be. And I'm so excited these days because when I started in this work, again, it was in the very early 90s, and there was this fragmentation, this conflict between the beautiful science and research and cognitive approaches of the West, and then these lovely, gentle, compassion, acceptance-based, the wisdom, that ancient wisdom of the East. And they were against each other. It's like, pick one or the other, and you can't have both at the same time. Well, that is just absolutely no longer the truth. There has been this beautiful love story, this integration that has come, right? One story now, which can be told in different ways, and we can choose the way that is most appropriate to tell this beautiful story of empowerment to an individual client. So I made this slide. Now, there's a ton of information on this, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but you can stop the video if you'd like to have a deeper look at it. But I just want to point out on the left-hand side column, right here are all, not all, but here are the major components of how human beings experience life in an emotional way. Down in the red section, the guilt, the shame has been cut off a little bit. The guilt, the shame, apathy, grief, and fear, those are the energies that are low vibrational energies. And then moving up into the yellow section, pride, anger, desire, fear, there's more intensity, more strength and power in those emotions. And then up into the green section, right? Enlightenment, peace, joy, love, reason, and so on and so on. And I was lucky enough to be in the field in the very late 90s when Dr. Candace Pert actually gave her research to the world in her book called Molecules of Emotion. And in that book, for the very first time, she identified the neurochemicals that the body uses to connect its mind with its body. And it's really the first time where we saw the scientific evidence coming from Western research that supported what the Eastern ancient wisdom had known for all time, that the mind and the body are connected, they are one, and they are in constant communication with each other. And then in the middle section here, we have the really field-changing theory of Dr. Stephen Porges, the polyvagal theory. And I just wanted to point out how much in alignment these are. So down in the red oval on the bottom, what he calls the dorsal vagus, the frozen part of the parasympathetic nervous system, real survival-based. And here we have the emotions, the same as we see in the red section under the vibrational scale: dissociation, numbness, depression, helplessness, shut down. And then the yellow oval, the sympathetic nervous system, where there is a danger, there's a threat response, but not survival based. And here this maps onto the pride and anger section of the emotional vibrational chart. That's the sympathetic nervous system. And then there we are at the top, right? This beautiful place in the nervous system where there is a sense of calm and groundedness, settledness, and that's where all these biological markers that we see that EFT is impacting, really clearly helping the nervous system to move from its threat responses into its place of safety. And so Porges's theory are really in alignment with the emotional vibrational scale. And then over on the right-hand side, I put a picture of the chakra system, right? This is part of the subtle energy system of the body, the chakra system, and also all the meridians that are sending information throughout the entire body. And so as we're tapping on these acupressure points, which are on pivotal nodes of that meridian system, we're sending this information, which again is sending messages of safety to the emotional centers of the brain. And just to see how that actually maps onto polyvagal theory, emotional vibrational scale, right? Those lower chakras being about survival, the middle chakras being more about power, and then the top chakras about the central, the ventral vagus system. So one story, one beautiful story told in many different ways, which are all adaptable to whatever the belief system is most in alignment with who your client is. But it's the story of the mind, body, spirit, right? Coming together, whether we see it from a psychoneuroimmunology point of view, from the medical system, whether we see it from a subtle energy system, whether we see it from Porges. It's all the same approach. All coming together in a both and rather than that original either or that we had been dealing with in the early days. So we have an energy technique which is has the capacity to right in this moment in time to interrupt the stress response, and which then used diligently over time can actually begin to impact the chronic patterns of emotion, patterns of thought, patterns of behavior that are creating suffering and distress, and really invite through the subtle energy system, through the nervous system, polyvagal approach, through the uplifting of the vibration of emotions, to really invite the client to move into a place of compassion and joy and love, and to really release what I've come to understand underneath all of the fears, right? There is a reservoir of love and joy that is accessible to the client, and EFT gives us a beautiful tool to tap into that reservoir of love. Now, in the next video, we'll move from the theory, which is important, but move from the theory to really looking at then how do we actually do this? So how does conscious EFT operate as a holistic, empowered framework that really holds a client and offers them safety, and when they're ready enough to encourage them into the growth and the evolution that's available to them. And so that's what we shall do in the next video. And until then, may you be well, may you be happy, and may you be excited about innovative new approaches to doing the work that you love. Blessings.